3, 2, 1. Okay, welcome back to the Council Committee of the Whole. This is the second half of a meeting we tried to go through the other day. It ended up being a little bit of a long day. After about 10 hours, we decided that we could maybe put the additional agenda items over to another day, and here we are back in the same week. So we have two items. The first is the tax repayment mechanism bylaw. I think Scott's going to introduce that one, Scott and Danielle, and then 2020 capital budget revision. Danielle will lead that one. So I guess we'll start with 1.1. And Scott, I'll throw it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Afternoon, Council. So on Tuesday, Council asked administration to come back with a mechanism to allow taxpayers to enter into a tax repayment plan with interest rates that match the city's rate of borrowing. So we've considered a number of flexible payment alternatives, including options that reflect the city's borrowing rate, should a taxpayer not be able to meet the August 31st tax deadline. And as you know, we currently have the TIPS program. TIPS allows a taxpayer to spread out their annual bill over 12 months. Taxpayers can join TIPS as long as they catch up with the months that have passed in the year and continue with their monthly payments. However, currently we have a 1% per month late sign-up fee with a maximum amount of 6% that's administered, as enrollment is expected to start in January. So the 1% per month fee was designed around the June 30th due date and a July 1st penalty date. With moving the due date to August 31st, the 1% fee could cost the property owner more than a September 1st penalty if a property owner wanted to sign up in August. So administration's recommendation is to achieve a payment flexibility is the implementation of a modified TIPS program. Customers interested in the flexible payment options would be required to enroll before August 31st. They would contact the tax department to start the process. We would allow flexibility in the amount that they are willing to pay to catch up or their monthly payments. We can work the program what they feel is affordable for them, as long as they're paid up by December 31st. The regular 1% per month late sign-up fee would be waived for the remainder of 2020. The outstanding balance, as I mentioned, would be spread out over the remaining months of the year. And those who are enrolled in TIPS, there would be no interest charges or penalties as long as they remain current with their payment plan. And with this option, the taxpayer would automatically stay on TIPS until they're requested to be removed. So we provided some examples of how we envisioned the plan to work in Appendix One. We gave you the average residential and non-residential property with some different scenarios on their catch-up amount or down payment, however you want to say it. You can see how the monthly payments would vary over the last few months if they signed up in August. We've provided this recommendation after factoring in the city's borrowing rate and the administrative burden of processing interest rate calculations. Although Council, you've asked for a program that implements the city's cost of borrowing, administration believes that the opportunity for increased TIP enrollment provides more long-term benefits than the small rate of return. I'd like to provide you a little bit more information that's not in the report, and I apologize for that. So with our cost of borrowing at an annual rate of 2.25% and prorating the rate over the remaining months of the year, because a 2.25 is an annual interest rate. If a property owner was to sign up in late August and lease finance the remaining 4 months, you're looking at an interest rate of about 0.75% for those 4 months. And if we were to implement something that used our borrowing rate, we would expect to generate a considerable amount less than we generate typically with our late sign-up fee, which is we generated about $13,000 last year in late sign-up fees. So we expect that if we went to the interest rate scenario, the revenue that we would generate would be significantly less than the $13,000. So in the examples in Appendix 1, if you want to look at the first residential scenario, The additional fee or interest that we would charge based on the annual 2.25%, we've calculated out to be, for that first example, $9.56. That's the interest that would be over the 4 months for the $318.50 monthly payment. So in our thought process, we felt we need to consider the staff's time involved to implement this processing fee. For example, it takes time to calculate the interest charge. It takes time to explain it to the customer, and it takes time to staff to transfer that interest charge out of the tax system into the finance system, because the tax system is strictly for taxes. That interest charge would be an additional revenue source to the city and belongs in the finance system versus the tax system. And also with the given COVID situation, we feel it would be best not to have customers standing at our front counters for an extended period of time when City Hall opens. And in the end, we felt that to implement an interest rate equal to our rate of borrowing may actually cost more administratively than we would gain financially. So we believe that the risk to our cash flow and loss in revenue is mitigated by having a proactive sign-up option and keeping August 31st tax deadline with a 6% penalty on September 1st for those not enrolled in the program. The elimination of the 1% TIPS setup fee and not having an interest charge would be a small financial loss, but we believe that the modified TIPS program will provide significant flexibility for tax owners or taxpayers' ability to pay. And again, longer term, some additional uptake to the TIPS program will provide a positive benefit to our cash flow as we receive more predictable property tax payments earlier in the year. So just in closing, administration believes that removing the current late sign-up fee for TIPS is the best option, and it would allow the city to provide the most flexibility to our customers, and it provides, we feel, more long-term benefit to the organization. I will add, back on Tuesday when we were dealing with the mill rate bylaw, this bylaw, C-1423, was also part of that. There was no motion passed to give 3 readings. So we brought it back today to ask for 3 readings, the bylaw C-1423. We've modified the bylaw since you last saw it, and now it includes the removal of the TIPS late sign-up fee for 2020. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Okay. Thanks very much, Scott. Any questions for Scott? I see Councillor Bressy.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I don't actually have a question, but I'm happy to make the motion if you'd like me to. Okay. Well, I'll
just give an opportunity. Was there anybody that did have any questions for Scott? Yeah, Wade?
I'm just wondering if there's options, like, and maybe I'm just misreading this, Scott, if you can correct me, but it looks like there's an 8-month option, which I think is good, but I'm just wondering if there's options for people if they wanted to do a 6-month or an 8-month or a 12-month catch-up plan. Just trying to be cognizant of people's cash flow coming out of this. That might make some sense for some people to be able to defer up to a year. Some people might say, hey, I just want to get over in 6 months, but I just wonder if we've got some flexibility there to give, an ABC option.
So if I understand Councillor Pilak correctly, Mayor Given, what they would have to do is, once you're enrolled in TIPS, it's an ongoing program. To get off, you would essentially have to say we want to cancel. So if they came in, so if you're thinking a 6-month plan, so if City Hall is, so when we levy taxes and they want to come in and say, I want to pay off my taxes in the last 6 months of the year, is that kind of what I'm getting at?
No, I guess what I'm wondering is, I think, so if somebody hasn't paid their taxes, they come in and they say, hey, I want to start a TIPS plan, I want to get caught up. I'm just wondering, am I understanding they have basically, once they enroll in the plan, they would have 8 months to get kind of caught up on what they owed and what would be due forward?
So it would depend on when they came in or when they got signed up. The earlier, the better. You can spread your payments out over a longer period of time. the flexibility part comes on that down payment part, and how much they want to put down. So we could customize what they want their monthly payments to be over when they come in, depending on how much they want to put down. If they want a higher monthly payment, they would put less down. If they want to put more down in a lower monthly payment, that would be their option.
Okay, so just to walk me through this so I understand it from ratepayer. So I could technically walk in August 15th and say, hey, I just can't I've deferred my taxes, I can't pay it right now. Any of my payments that I deferred would start adding into my TIP program or my monthly program for that point and be prorated over the next 6 months at that point, or?
No, sorry, it has to be, the deadline's December 31st. So August to December, depending on when they come in August, let's just pretend August is, they can't make it and their payments would start September 1st. They would have 4 months to pay off the balance. December 31st is the deadline. Okay. To have zero balance.
So, and I guess it's addressed as that, but it doesn't address the bigger issue. If they can't pay it and they can't pay it by then our normal penalties and mechanisms would kick in, or it would be basically 24% a year sort of a scenario. And that's what I'm still worried about. I'm not sure if that's going to be addressed through another thing, but I'm still very worried about that, especially on commercial properties, that people might be behind. So just still a concern for me.
Yeah, and Mayor, I can understand Councillor Pilat's concern with TIPS. The way it works is the zero, the balance at the end of the year must be zero in order to continue forward. Yeah,
and so I guess I'm a little bit cautious and a little bit concerned about approving this, because as good as it looks, if somebody can't afford their payment for $318.50 a day, they somehow have to figure out a payment of $637 to be paid off by the end of the year, or they're going to start being heavily penalized still. So I'm just not sure how we help them more than just this. I think this is great. I just don't think this is going to be enough for me, but I think this is great for a start.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Plott. Anybody else have any questions? Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Question for Scott, or maybe it's for Director Bork. If we found that there was a large amount of take-up on this program, and in financial forecasting we were getting a little bit concerned as we started to see that people potentially were falling behind, it was getting towards the end of the year, what would it look like to sort of revisit this program at that time, or is it do it now for, the what ifs? Or how does it look like to visit it again in November, when all of a sudden we're a little concerned about what it looks like with the number of people that have paid and how the paying is going?
Director Bork?
Yeah, some of our comfort in recommending this so far is that we do need the people that can afford to pay. That is why we still have recommended an August 31st limit with the tax penalty if you don't take the measures to go forward. There's a lot of variables there. We would have to look at that later in the year. Our recommendation, though, is to keep some measures in to encourage payment for those who can pay, so that we can continue operations with some predictability.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, but so just to follow Councillor Clayton's question, so would it be possible for administration to provide council prior to the end of the year a bit of an update about sort of uptake of the system or amount of property taxes left owing?
Absolutely. Even in director's report, I've been regularly updating on just TIPS payments and who's been going out and who's been coming in. That is part of a regular update from the director, and I'll make sure that it has sufficient detail for you going forward.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Platt?
Thanks for giving. Just on that, if we're going to have that, is there any way also maybe potentially come to us what options could look like for people that aren't going to be able to have their debt paid by 2021 on January 1st, I guess, of 2021. My fear would be that if we don't get in front of that, and I've kind of mentioned this before, and I'm all in support of we need to try to get cash flow where we can get it, but if people literally can't pay by the end of the year, and now they're going to be penalized 6% every quarter, this just could get hard on people, and I'm just wondering if when we come back later in the year, when we have a better understanding of this, if we could maybe have a plan of what it would look like that we could help some of these people through that. And again, I'm thinking of the larger property owners, the large commercial, large retail and stuff that might be vacated that might not want to be paying their bills. So maybe it won't be as bad, but I'm just worried about options for that.
Director Bork?
Thanks, Mayor Given. Part of our comfort in this plan is that we do continue to ensure that those that can, like I've said, those that can pay. I appreciate that we won't be able to help everyone, and that goes back to our fiscal capacity as a municipality. I would be prepared to talk about this as we see what the issue looks like going forward as we're monitoring our cash flow in early fall. But at this time, I wouldn't be prepared to bring any options forward at this time.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Director Bork. Anybody else? Sorry, Councilman Haas, you had a question.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I don't know, Mr. Bork or Scott. Originally, there was a plan for August 30th to pay. The cost for city was $900,000. But doing with this, how much cost will go? City has to pay for it. Like, I'm going to be lose the money for that, doing this.
Director Bork?
Sure. So that number is still in place. That was for waiving the May and July penalties. So we have done that. The actual calculation for May was just over $340,000 that we forego. This doesn't impact that, as we're still maintaining the September 1st penalty for those that don't sign up for a program.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? I don't see anybody else raising their hand, so then I would go to Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. I'd move that committee recommend council give 3 readings to bylaw C-1423. And just to speak to it is, first of all, I want to say thank you to Scott and Shane, Danielle, and their teams for the really quick turnaround on this. Really appreciate you guys coming with these options in a couple days. And for me, I wasn't concerned about us recouping our costs of borrowing. I was concerned about us recouping more than our costs of borrowing. And so this definitely fits what I was hoping hoping to see. I think that it was very appropriate for us to give people with very little questions asked, very low barriers, the ability to go to August 31st and not pay their taxes if they really need that liquidity. I think it's appropriate for us to give them a few extra months above that if we need to as well. But I like that this has the barrier of you don't just get to do it just because. You actually have to call in City Hall and you actually have to set up a plan. And I think that's a small barrier that will make sure that that's mostly just people that actually really need to access it will access this. I'd also agree with Councillor Palat that this is a good start. It might not be enough, but we do have the ability as a council, as we get into it, to forgive portions of taxes and penalties if we really need to. So doing this definitely doesn't limit us from taking further action, but I think it's an appropriate first action. Well, not first action, but additional action for now. So I hope council will support this.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Seeing nobody raising their hands, then I will call for the vote. All in favor? Okay, Councillor Clayton was jumping around my screen, but I think that was unanimous. Thanks, Councillor Clayton. And then we move on then, I guess, to the 2020 capital budget revisions. And Danielle, I think you're going to take that one for us.
Hey, good afternoon. So I think Shane's going to maybe put up a slide for while I present the report. But in the meantime, because I have it available, I did want to give more of a COVID financial impact verbal update to committee. So as you know, forecasting in 2020 has been nothing but a challenge and a constant moving target. So we're dealing with a lot of variables and unknowns at this time. We have to make a number of assumptions, and we're always trying to incorporate information as quickly as it changes and picking up on new information as it's released. So earlier this week with the quarter 1 forecast, you were presented with a potential year-end surplus of $320,000 for the city. So within this forecast, we had assumed at that time that maybe we could reopen early July. Of course, subsequent to that, we received new information. But essentially at that time, we were projecting that the impact of COVID would be close to $5 million for the city. This was, of course, offset by 2019's strategic restructuring that was done, the layoff savings and benefit savings, delays in hiring and potential vacancies, as well as some increased investment income and just some savings on general goods. So our utilities, our fuel costs, our training and travel, those sorts of things. So this is kind of what allowed us to become, or to forecast that break-even number. So as I said, subsequent to that, we learned that the province, upon sharing their reopening strategy, we wouldn't see recreation facilities open until the fall. We wouldn't see large events happen until maybe next year. So as a result of this, we went back and revisited the numbers again, picking up the new information. We changed our target to a reopen of September, and we increased the COVID projected impact to $8 to $8.5 million by the end of September. So assuming some additional salary savings along with this, utility savings, general goods and supply savings, we still feel that the city is going to be greatly impacted by this, and that the original Q1 forecast could now look more like a deficit of $3 to $3.5 million for the city. So just an update on kind of what we're looking at for changes in information, and that we're going to continue to provide as much information as we can on a regular basis. Okay. So this is also, so getting into capital, this is the proposed changes to the 2020 approved capital budget. So the recommendation today is that committee recommend council approve the changes as presented. This is a summary of the funding changes as well as new projects that have been added to the 2020 plan. So just some background, the 2020 capital budget was approved, of course, in November of 19. Since this approval is part of our year-end procedures, we reconciled capital funding sources and determined that more funding needed to be allocated and used. Specifically, MSI, Municipal Sustainability Initiative funding, and our federal gas tax funding. These funds need to be allocated and spent in order to avoid repayment to the federal and provincial government, and to ensure that the city can still receive its full 2020 allocation. So to ensure maximization of funding, administration considered a number of potential capital projects. We reviewed funding sources of those approved at deliberations in the fall, kept in mind the eligibility requirements and minimal project spending requirements, realizing that, of course, only some can qualify for MSI and gas tax funding. So for the 2020 fiscal year, the city needs to allocate an additional $20 million of MSI funding to capital projects. As I previously noted, MSI does have certain eligibility requirements and a minimum project amount of $710,000. So what we did here is we did add some new capital projects. So you'll see new projects funded by MSI in total of $13.47 million. And then we did reallocate or make funding revisions from the original budget in order to maximize spending of this. For federal gas tax, the city needs to allocate an additional $1 million for capital projects. Like MSI, there's certain eligibility requirements as well. However, there's no minimum project balance on this one. So once we reviewed the 2020 capital budget, we did some funding revisions in total of $900,000, freeing up capital tax, of course. So again, as a result of the newly assigned funding sources, that $900,000 of capital tax became available for new projects, in addition to $1.2 million that was not allocated at budget deliberation. So as a result of the proposed changes, you'll see with the funding revision, so $750,000 will go back into the facility renewal reserve, help replenish that a little bit, and as well, $5.5 million of the bypass grant will be carried forward. This grant doesn't have a time frame on it like the MSI and gas tax funding does, so therefore we felt it responsible to spend that later than the MSI. So in addition to that, you know, as I mentioned before, federal and provincial grant dollars received but not spent, we do run the risk of having to repay money back, or of course not qualifying for our full 2020 allocation. Additionally, as we get later in the year, our window of opportunity for certain construction can get smaller. We just recommend that Council approve the proposed changes to the 2020 capital plan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Whiteway. So open for questions. I see Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Thanks for that, Danielle, and for the verbal update. As far as just sticking to the capital plan, I really just want to comment that I super appreciated all the backgrounders on each of the capital projects that was provided prior to. It really gave a bit more of a comprehension as to exactly what the project was. I guess one of my questions is, I see there's some remaining unallocated, and recently we just had a discussion about the potential for the archives to move into the Heritage Discovery Center. Now, if that were to become a possibility, we'd probably have to renovate our museum as well as make space for it to work for the archives downstairs. Would a project like that qualify under the MSI or gas tax fund?
Danielle?
So there is a lot of different criteria. What I've normally done is just get a sense from the province ahead of time if it would be a qualifying. Sometimes with recreation facilities it can be specific, and we'd have to spend, like I said, over $700,000 for MSI. So again, I'm not sure what the dollar amount on that would be, but anything remaining unallocated, so we can't allocate the $300,000 that we have sitting there. That one will for sure be added to what's available come 2021. Okay. So the thought was anything remaining unallocated would be considered and included in the funding plan for 2021. And of course, additional projects could be considered at that point. We tried to stick with those that we knew we could spend money on pretty quickly and ensure that we can maximize what we have sitting that needs to be spent.
And I appreciate that, especially the backgrounder. I see a lot of thought and consideration went into some of these projects, especially in that Smith subdivision improvements. That's going to go a long way for future development of that area that the city invested in. So thank you so much for that. And I have another question, but I'll leave it to the rest of the council for right now and to see if it comes up. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Any other questions for administration? Yeah, Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Argument. I guess I'm struggling a little bit with this. I understand that we're approving that, but I'm curious what the other little two-page we got had a little bit more items on it and how that affects this from Tuesday. A lot of the numbers match up, but I'm just seeing some differences that I'm a little bit confused by. So can I just get some direction on that?
Danielle?
Thank you, Mayor Given. So your second appendix, this is basically taking what you approved in the fall of 2019 and is now incorporating all of the proposed changes.
Okay. Okay, there's just some, I guess there's some stuff on here that I thought we might still be able to discuss too from the other list. Maybe that's the ship sailed on those is what I was a little bit, has the ship sailed on, I guess, everything that's not on this list already then?
So the items on that list, a lot of them have already gone out to tender. They've started the projects because they were approved back in the fall for 2020.
Okay. Thanks for that. And so my only other question for me, Mayor, there's some things on here that I don't want to support. I'd like to have discussions about maybe and see if I'm the only one that doesn't want to, but I don't know if it would mean starting to break this into specific line by line, which would obviously change timelines here by a lot, but I know for me, I would definitely I'd like to have a pretty good discussion about the Smith subdivision and the snow dump ones specifically for me. I'm struggling with those two. So would I just ask now, or how would you like to handle those ones?
Well, we're into kind of a mini budget thing. I see Director Bork has popped up. You may have a recommendation in addition. I would suggest that we look at the items that there is more of a consensus around, and that we start to tag those off so we can deal with the ones that there's general support for, if there are any. And then we could deal with the ones that there might be more difference of opinion on. We could either do it as one recommendation that administration had of everything, and if we're not comfortable with that, then we could do it like we do at budget and have a motion on each item. I move that council approve the revision to the funding source of Highway 43X rehab, and then kind of move on through there. Would be another way to do it. Director Bork, did you have another suggestion, or did administration have another recommendation?
No, that would work. The couple pieces of information just important to remember are that this isn't, we aren't starting from a clean slate here. Not approving, we need to have projects that we can begin to construction and make applications for grants this year. If we switch out some of those that are on this list, we have to either look to other projects that we still could complete this year. It isn't just a straight cash availability. We're trying to manage some grant issues in this. The capital tax ones, there's a lot more flexibility, or go or no go. It could be either way on those. But the ones where we've allocated MSI funding, there are consequences to removing things from a list, and I just want to make sure we have an opportunity to discuss what those are before final approvals.
Sure. So Shane or Horacio, I see Jackie. Shane or Horacio, what are the consequences of removing something on the MSI list or the gas tax list and not replacing something with something of equal value that can be done this year? Like what are the consequences of quote unquote saving that money? Horacio? Or Shane, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Shane.
Ultimately, if it could be that we as a municipality don't receive this, or actually we would have to return this funding to the province. Some of this funding is time dated, and through the fresh eyes of finance, we have done a thorough review and made sure we've captured all those. And that's why we've come forward at this mid-year, is to make sure we've cleaned it. That's been our first priority, is cleaning up, making sure we don't return anything. Best way was to look at future capital plans, move things to this year, and it frees up space in future years. Also the advantage of adding additional stimulus to the community.
Okay, thanks, Shane. Horacio, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, just to add the level of risk. If we don't spend particularly the MSI funding under the current provincial situation, that they will be looking for any sort of funding not spent under certain rules that could be captured. So I would be, strongly recommending that somehow we allocate the funding, particularly the MSI, to some projects. Could be this proposed recommendation here in front of you right now, or in other way to reallocate, but to use the funding in 2020 as much as we can, because of the higher risk of losing it if we don't use it.
Okay, thanks, Horacio. And Shane, Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. A question for Danielle, and I know you touched on it, but I just need it to be more concrete in my head. So tell me, some of these items that I see on this document, on the titled 2020 Capital Budget Revised, were things that were approved already at budget. So what is this list here? It's not just the new items, it's things that haven't already been tendered, or have you reallocated them? Like, I'm a bit confused. Some of these items were already approved at council, why are we seeing them, or sorry, at budget, why are we seeing them again?
Danielle?
Thanks, Mayor Given. So I wanted to be able to provide council with what the 2020 full capital plan would look like. So taking what was approved in budget deliberations in November, then incorporating what's in front of you for changes. So nothing other than what we've got shown here has been changed. I just wanted to provide a full 2020 capital plan that incorporated what was originally approved and these revisions.
If I can, Mayor, given a couple other questions.
Go ahead.
So tell me then, Appendix One has the new revisions, and then the total chart that has everything. So there's administration is suggesting an additional $1.3 million in capital tax expenditures. What does that put the total capital tax expenditures for 2020?
I do have that number. It would be a moment for me to be able to pull up what the new capital tax in total would be under 2020. But it has not, I will note it's a little bit of what was approved, plus the, when we did our year-end procedures, we did find some additional capital tax. So I can pull the exact number, but it should be what was approved plus the additional that was found. So no additional spending in capital tax than what we'd originally planned to levy.
Well, no, that's not.
Just
Appendix 1A shows additional items.
The new projects are coming, right. So what they're coming from is the 1.2 million that we found when we cleaned up from last year, plus the 900,000 of gas tax funding revisions. All of those projects were previously funded by capital tax in 2020. So we've changed the funding source.
So it's like maybe this is better for Director Bork. So basically we found some extra money in our wallet that we had already planned on spending. And so we're actually going to go ahead and spend it, even though we could be putting it in a savings account.
Director Bork?
And that will be a choice for council. We, in a normal procedure, this would have come forward in the fall variances and looked at future capital projects going forward. The reason we brought forward at this time was for there to be an opportunity to create some additional stimulus in the community while we had some facilities that were closed. The capital tax side does not have to be spent, doesn't have any impact on any of our grant applications, and that's a choice for council. We wanted to give an option to we thought was a benefit to our facilities and a benefit to our community by bringing it forward at this time.
Okay, so this is my last question, Mayor Given. So this is probably for Danielle. Is there any items in the new suggested items under the capital tax column that could go? I know the criteria for MSI is 700,000. I think is the minimum, and I think you noted that there's no minimum for gas tax, but there's nothing in the capital tax column that could go into gas tax.
Ms. Whiteway?
Thanks, Mayor Given. Yes, we took a hard look at each project to ensure they meet the eligibility criteria. And it's difficult with recreation facilities, especially those that have hockey teams and a lot of commercial events and such. It doesn't seem to be supported by those funding sources.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Palat?
Thanks, Mayor Given. So just so I can understand something else here. So hypothetically, something like the storm where they want to do this expansion that I personally would like to see us try to look at doing. But if we were looking at the Revolution Place in a context of MSI funding now, and we were doing a project like that expansion and the Revolution Place vision for $419,000 and $125,000 enhancements. All of a sudden we had, so that being, $500,000 44K, if we got that up to $1.5 million or $2 million because we did other things in that building, would that all qualify for MSI funding then?
Slightly?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Director Bork.
Danielle, please jump in as well. But the fact that the Storm are a tenant make Revolution Place ineligible for MSI funding. We would have to use capital tax essentially for most of those projects.
So even if the city wanted to do something with one of its facilities, it's just the city, not the Storm, anything to do with, that wouldn't qualify that we want to expand our facilities? I just thought that was good under MSI.
No, it's a specific criteria. It was mainly dealing with professional hockey teams and WHL, but Storm are captured in that criteria that prevent us from using MSI for that facility.
So, and maybe this is where I'm getting kind of hung up, but we're trying to enhance our facility to be able to do more concerts, to help our tenants that are big, make better soundproof in there with baffling systems that were discussed. That wouldn't qualify. Nothing to do with the Storm, just the building itself for an entertainment.
So for the MSI criteria for recreation and sports facilities, those that are home to professional, semi-professional, or are used for commercial operations do not qualify for MSI funding.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Just back to the process. Remind me how you want to go through the new additional items, or what you're hoping to do for process here?
Well, I think administration, there's obviously some nuance. I'm a bit surprised by the MSI sort of ruling on Revolution Place, but so I think it demonstrates that there's quite a bit of detail that as elected officials we probably don't have, and we need to acknowledge and reflect, understand that administration's gone through this in a pretty good level of detail. We obviously have full latitude if council wants to go on specific things. We just need to recognize that there's, real consequences. We may not have all of the information available about what those consequences are. We heard from administration that, to be pretty direct on the MSI side in particular, funds that aren't used in 2020 are likely to go back, and we will lose the opportunity to use them for economic activity in our community this year, or potentially any year. So based on that and just, hearing some of those details, I think my recommendation, council, will of council, so would be that we should really look at this as an overall package. If there's something additional or different, then maybe we have some follow-up motions, but I think we need to look at this as a comprehensive administrative recommendation, that we would be starting to take some significant risks if we're changing without sort of all the full detail that administration has at their hand. Yeah, Councillor Plott.
Just one other question there, given maybe this is for, I'm not sure who in administration, but looking at the Smith subdivision improvements, the one thing that stuck out to me is that we're not going to be commencing until 2021 on this anyways, and so it's not a true shovel-ready project that's going to see us inject the $5 million in community right with some design work, I'm sure. Do we have anything Hughes Lake area related that is more ready that we could start looking at there? And I guess the reason I'm asking that is there's part of me that we've spent an awful lot of money and time, and I'm going back to economic development call I was on earlier today on getting Hughes Lake ready, but until we were going to be a catalyst to getting that area going and maybe funding and getting some servicing into that area, it could sit there an awfully long time. And so I'm wondering if we're looking at future revenue generation, if we might be better served spending some money on getting Hughes Lake moving forward sooner than later versus Smith subdivision, which I know has value, but it's not bringing anything new to the market that we don't already have. And so I'm just thinking of the potential 3P opportunities, greenhouses, some other things that could go out in that area. Just wondering if the administration has any preliminary plans or any ideas on numbers if we wanted to reallocate some of these MSI funds to a project like that.
So I see Director Glavin's on the call, and so I wonder if I appreciate that some of the projects fall in different service areas, so Director Glavin, are you the best to answer that one?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Given. Yeah, so I know that Hughes Lake is a little bit further behind as they haven't completed all their planning. As you're aware, Councillor Plutz, that's coming forward here shortly, I believe, on the industrial side, as well as the servicing study that was being prepared for Hughes Lake. So as far as things that are, Smith subdivision is further along in a process that we're able to bring that out for design and build faster than Hughes Lake. As far as allocating money for next year into Hughes Lake, you know, we don't have an order of magnitude estimate on what that would look like yet, as far as what any of that costing would be, and we're probably a couple months away before I think we'd be ready to even start looking at what the cost could be in that area. But I hadn't prepared for that today.
So could I just follow up with that, Mayor Gibbon? I'm just wondering, like, if we're just at design stages, or if, I appreciate we found some, you know, maybe have some additional cash right now that we want to try to do. I'm really torn on the Smith subdivision for $5 million, even though we have the money to spend it. I'm not a big believer that that $5 million is coming back anytime soon, unless we're going to start having conversations about what we're doing specifically with that land. But if we're just in design phases, and I can appreciate this might be a little bit farther along in design, I'm sure there's lots of engineers and consultants that'll be very happy looking for work this summer that might be able to fast track some of this. If there's other designs we should be looking at that might be bringing in revenue, do we need to know? Do we need to have these allocated by the end of the year, or does this need to be allocated by a certain date?
There, Ms. Whiteway, Director Bork, you know, or City Manager Galante, that's sort of a MSI allocation question. The timelines on when it needs to be.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. So it is important that this is, the plan had been no later than the end of June of this year. Reason being is that's when we submit our applications to the province for our projects. If because of the situation that we're in as well, if we don't start allocating all of our projects, we won't get our full 2020 money. And as well, the province has already indicated cash will not be advanced even for 2020 until unallocated cash is used up. So it becomes cash flow, and we need to get our applications in sooner rather than later.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Whiteway. I saw Councillor O'Toole and then Councillor Blackburn.
Yeah, Mayor Gibbon, thank you for letting me get in. We hashed this out in the last budget review last year, and basically administration was trying to find funding sources. They've done that. They presented today, and they found a couple smaller projects that they could fit into those areas as well. And if we're not happy with this, in another couple months, we're going to be starting budget negotiations for the next year. And all I can say is once this is all finalized, we're going to be starting to see other projects coming up. And at this point in time, I'm relatively happy with the process that's gone through. It's been a lot more streamlined, and maybe that's a little bit hard for some people to chew. But in past budgets I've been at, it was drawn and wasn't this, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not as open as it was with this process. So if, when the time comes, I'd like to make the motion to recommend Council approve the changes in the 2020 capital budget as presented. But I can still see there's some more discussion going to take place. But I'm very happy with the process at this time. Thank you, Mayor Gibbon.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. So I appreciate the willingness to let others have some questions. It can be, we could have questions forever. It might be useful to move on to motions. I will go through. If it starts to feel like we're going a bit into overtime with questions, then I'll come back to Councillor O'Toole for that motion. Then we can actually debate the motion, and we're actually debating something, okay? So I'll have a little bit of leeway there. Yep. I've got Councillor Blackburn and then Councillor Bresty, and I think Director Glavin, did you have some, sorry, before we do that, Director Glavin had some additional technical detail. Director Glavin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gibbon. Just going back to Councillor Palat's question about Hughes Lake. So what you're seeing that we're allocating here is some of this we're pulling projects forward from future years. So, you know, our engineers may slap me a little bit for going into this, but like Crystal Ridge Road and other overlays, we would have done that next year. You know, with this additional MSI, we're pulling that project forward to generate economic activity. So with regard to Hughes Lake, if we were able to identify projects in Hughes Lake, theoretically, we've freed up capital capacity next year because we're doing a project we would have done in 2021, and we're going to do it in 2020 instead. So if we identify some projects that may utilize that magnitude of funds, we could identify them this year and bring them forward in capital in November.
Okay, thanks for that, Director Glenn. Okay, so I do have a sort of a full queue here. Maybe do it around the horn. Let everybody make sure that they get a chance, and then we look to get the motions. Okay. Councillor Blackburn, then Councillor Bressie, then Councillor Clayton, then Councillor Thies.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. I think what is occurring to me about this is over the past year or two, we've asked our administration to do a number of things, a number of innovative things in order to make our budgets work better. And a lot of it had to do with making cuts or changes, staff reductions, all kinds of things that have made it better for our taxpayers in terms of the increases that they've had to deal with, and in terms of, in some cases, some efficiencies within our government. But I really think that what we're looking at today is more of the same. It's innovation. It's a good close look at the efficiencies that might be gained by making sure that we use all of the MSI and gas tax money that's available to us. And I'm happy to accept the recommendations that our administration have got into because of the amount of work that went into making these recommendations. I think that when we get to budget time in the fall, we'll have a chance to talk a lot more about future expenditures and what it is that we want to focus on in terms of capital planning. And the way things are going for us right now, the fall will come before you know it. And so I think that now is the time to go ahead with this, to thank administration for the work that they've done on it and get on with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. So I've got Councillor Bressie, Councillor Thies, Councillor Clayton, Councillor Minhot.
Great, thank you, Mayor Gibbon. I've got a few questions about particular items that are on the list, but I'll save those for when we've got a motion on the floor. But one question I'd like to ask about an item that's not on the list is, for me, I appreciate that a lot of these projects are advancing in our capital plan, and for me, that's more my preference to approach this, is advancing things rather than adding new things. One that I've kind of got on my crosshairs that I'd like to see us take some action on that is in our capital plan is railway crossing upgrades for anti-whistling. And right now that's it's unfunded, but it does appear in our capital plan for a few years from now. And I'm wondering if there was any discussion about potentially advancing that on our list, since we already did the engineering study, if council had a will to advance that, if we'd likely be able to have the capability to advance that to this year.
Sure. See, City Manager Galante.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mayor Gibbon. So just to provide an order of magnitude about that, you may recall, in order to comply with all the new regulations, fencing, lights and arms, we're talking multi-million-dollar improvements, right? So we're talking between $4 to $5 million at least, and that's a very rough calculation. So when we design this proposal that you have in front of you, we're trying to maximize the value in the community, putting more, overlays, develop more roads, and the recommendation from us is to allocate the funding to that. The train whistle is for sure, an annoyance for many in the community, but just keep in mind the overall value that you get for the limited, resources we have in hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I had Councillor Clayton, then Councillor Thiessen, then Councillor Minhas.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm just trying to think of whether or not my comments are, I don't have specific questions. They might be left best for debate on the motion, so I'll pass, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Thiessen?
Actually, yeah, thanks, Mayor Given. I was going to say something similar. I think if Councillor O'Toole, if there's no other questions and Councillor O'Toole wanted to make the motion, I think we could have been having this discussion then. I'll just throw in my 2 cents. Maybe I might not enter into debate on this, but I just think maybe perhaps we're a bit guilty of overthinking this right now. I think administration came forward. There's money that needs to be spent, and the projects I think that they picked and put before us are forward-thinking. They're thoughtful. They're community-focused. They fall within council's priorities. And to not do it and to try to push it down the road a bit farther adds a big element of risk that I'm not comfortable with personally. I know there's lots of projects that we can do, but as Director Glavin said, these are actually moving things ahead. So it does affect our capital budget going forward next year in 2021, and there could be room for other projects then. I just want to thank Ms. Whiteway, Director Glavin, Horacio, for all the hard work that's gone into this, and at least putting it into a digestible format that I feel very confident in the suggestions that have been made, and I just want to thank administration for the work they put in, and I look forward to supporting this.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Minhas?
Yes, given I am very happy with this proposal, but I'm not really, one issue I have with the 3.6 million for the snow dump lining, but I'm not going to complain about it because administration worked very hard. Chris actually covered most of the stuff I was going to say. Only thing I just wonder if on the bottom it says the remaining fund is 310,000 or 258. Will that go back to the provincial government or can be used somewhere else for an MSI fund?
Thanks, Mayor Given. So Councillor Minhas, yes, we're comfortable that that amount will be able to be included in next year's funding sources for capital, so that won't have to be repaid.
Oh, okay, thank you. And otherwise, I think motion comes on the table. Thank you very much, Kevin O'Toole. You did put the motion on, and I think I'm pretty happy the way administration has work and hard work to get this, bring it to us. And also it will create some jobs, which is we needed this time with the COVID-19. So we need to move on to recovery mode. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Minhas. So I think we got all the way, cut it out, Councillor Thiessen. I think we got all the way around the horn there, and so I'll go to Councillor O'Toole so we can have a discussion debate. Councillor O'Toole, you're still up to make your motion? Except that you're on mute.
I see that. Well,
that's
the worst thing that happens today. That's not too bad. Mayor Given, thank you for the opportunity. I think administration has done an excellent job. They've listened to us throughout the last year since budget. And I would like to make a motion that I move that the committee recommend council approve the changes to the 2020 capital budget as presented. And with that, once again, I think everybody had a chance to talk, and it's very hard to get 9 people to agree on everything. And at this point in time, we all have our little things that we want to see in a budget, and some that we have a high rating for, and some are a little bit lower, and some are in the middle. But now we can debate it, and we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole, for getting us there. So open for discussion and debate on the motion. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I can't support the motion as it is. I have no problems with the MSI suggestions and allocations because there's no implication to the ratepayer. I have no problems with the gas tax fund, but I have some problems with the capital tax column. 2 in particular that I have concerns with are the Revolution Place line items and the Ernie Radburn Pavilion line item. And it's on a bigger picture that I have these concerns. In this term, we haven't had discussions of what the future of these buildings are going to do for us. We've never sat down and talked, you know, is the Revolution Place going to be a 10-year building for us? Is this where our storm as we know it are going to be for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? We've never got into those discussions. If the money we were putting into facilities, we're going to allow organizations to be less financial dependent on us or let our facilities make more money, and I could guarantee that over, you know, a 10-year period of time, I'd be more comfortable. But I can't say that we're going to use Revolution Place as it is today for the next 10 years. And so to put money into it without knowing its future is really concerning to me. And regardless that this is capital tax money that currently had no allocations put to it, it doesn't mean we have to spend it. And so I approve the I totally support administration suggestions on the MSI because there's no implications to the ratepayers, same as the gas tax. But right now, we're going through uncertain times. We don't know what we're going to need from our reserves. We don't know what we're going to need down the road. And to continue to spend money that we don't need to spend that has tax implications to people is something that I can't support. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Just one last question for administration here, just kind of on the same vein as Councillor Clayton, but the $791,000 that was remaining unallocated, what was the plan for that? Would it roll forward, or what was the?
Ms. Whiteway?
Thanks, Mayor Given. Correct. So that would become a funding source for the 2021 capital budget.
Okay, additional funding that we wouldn't have normally had, that would have?
Correct.
Okay. And so on this, I mean, I know I had lots of questions off the start, and I appreciate you guys being patient with me over Zoom, and you have been. But just, I could support all the MSI and the gas tax as well. I'm having a problem with the capital too, the same as Councillor Clayton. I'm struggling with those, and for the same reasons, I wish we could have a conversation about Revolution Place, because I might have an appetite to spend more there, but I feel like we've got a building that's 25 years old, it's an entertainment facility that probably needs us to decide at some point, are we just going to keep throwing a little lipstick on this thing for the next 15 or 20 years, or are we going to throw $5 or $7 or $10 million and limp it along 15 more years and then make a plan? So I have a hard time spending money on a building we haven't had a conversation about, so I'm struggling with that. I want to support the motion, but I can't support the capital tax stuff at this point either. Not how it's laid out today.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Platt. Well, I just want to ask you a question, because I have a similar feeling about Revolution Place. You know, I would be supportive of looking at a more comprehensive plan. So for administration, if council followed, you know, these budget revisions with a follow-up motion to ask administration to come forward with a more comprehensive plan for Revolution Place, what would there be a way to avoid any throwaway costs or prematurely spending these funds if council chose to go with a more comprehensive approach? Director Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. If I can just add a few comments, please. So a couple of days ago, you did hear from Catherine Ridgway about the vision for Rev Place. And she does have big plans that, you know, if we renovated the concession, the box office. We did have a discussion yesterday about what we could do at the box office so it isn't throwaway costs. And what we came up with is really focusing on online ticket sales. And rather than build a new box office, we're thinking just a kiosk type concept would work. So for those clients that can't purchase online, we'll still accommodate with a kiosk. For storm games, we could have multiple kiosks, which would be really low cost. And so it's not a bunch of throwaway costs. And then that would allow us to to enhance the lobby more, to spend more on the concessions, to make them more accessible. There's some code issues as well. Once we start renovations on the concessions, we have to meet new building code standards, is what we've been told by facilities. We also looked at the south concourse area to do some enhancements. And in regards to the letter from the storm, if I could just comment on that a little bit too, that we're very supportive of moving that direction. We think that'd be a revenue generator for us with the suites, the additional seats. Now, I understand the estimate was $1 million. In fact, I even heard that on the radio today that the letter was sent to the city by the storm, and you know, people are, I think, excited that we're looking at that option. In my view and in Catherine's view, I think we'll be in Rev Place for a few years to come yet. if we did these enhancements, I think it would go a long ways in refreshing the facility and making it a suitable venue for quite a few years to come. I think we'd, if council decided not to have it allocated the way we have it allocated on the capital tax side, but perhaps take some of that funding and move it more towards the suites, and to make sure that's properly funded, we'd certainly be supportive of doing that too. But we think what we're proposing plus the suites would set us up really good for the future and for events like concerts, storm games, and
Sure. So Director Miller, this maybe is, I don't know if it's for Ms. Whiteway or Mr. Bork, because it really is more of a process question. Like, so if council passed the motion that's on the floor today, does that mean that you run out and start signing checks and the money has disappeared, or is there still some latitude for council to have a discussion about a larger, more comprehensive plan for Revolution Place and potentially give some direction to administration this year? Mr. Bork?
On that one, as it is capital tax, we do have more latitude with that. We could leave it in the plan and the motion read that there be another check-in with council, if that was the will. I would say that part of the reason for including these projects in the capital plan was that they were smaller scale and they were in industries that weren't just roads, that we were putting different people back to work. Construction season is going away quickly, especially with the venues closed. So the more time we take, the less likely we'll be able to complete these projects before the facilities are needed.
Okay, thank you. Now, I did see a few people had hands, and I'm sorry, I've kind of lost it. Yeah, Councillor Bressie, and then I think Councillor Clayton, and I'm not sure if there's anybody else, but Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. For me, I've got questions about the Smith subdivision improvements, and specifically, I'm very supportive of Park Road and upgrading that to an urban standard. I think that's long overdue, so no concerns there. What I'm concerned about, though, is the proposed east-west road there in terms of the last plan that we had for Smith subdivision was that all turns into housing. That's something that I know where council's at. I'm fundamentally opposed to that plan for that right now, and I think that what we should be talking about is the potential for that's the next central hub of indoor and outdoor soccer, or that's a low-cost recreation building. And I'm worried that that road goes in and all of a sudden we're limited on what we can do with that site. So I'm wondering if there's any opportunity, if we do approve this, to definitely, again, no concerns with Park Road going ahead, but have further dialogue about what that site looks like before construction starts on that east-west component.
Director Glavin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gibbon. Yeah, so the projects aren't distinct, but they can be broken into components, and some of this can be done during the design. So to give you the rough magnitude of the different work being proposed here, if we didn't build the road and didn't put the services in to where you see them on the map, the Park Road and 92nd Avenue improvements are about $4 million of the roughly $5 million budget. As with most projects, it's cheaper to do these two things at the same time, but theoretically you could do them at different times. And if anybody's interested in why the road alignment is the way that it is, that's the way the current water system is built there. So we're basically just putting the utilities adjacent to each other within the current alignment, if you're wondering why we have that weird jog in the road.
Councillor Clayton and then Councillor Thiessen.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Something that I, didn't sort of touch on earlier was to address my concern of Revolution Place. During the budget,
I think we've lost you, Councillor Clayton. That's the longest I've seen you sit still.
Yeah.
Okay. So she's obviously having a difficult time with her reception. Happens to the best of us. So we'll go on to Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gibbon, and thank you, Shane, for clarifying the simplicity of some of the things that we could actually do and get people back to work. I think that's an important thing, and I think that's something that every member of council is considering through this. I guess I just have a question. This could be for Director Bork or Ms. Whiteway. The capital tax, if we were to remove, let's say, the 500, almost 400, over 400,000 from the Revolution Place vision, pull that out, that would directly impact our MSI because we have to put some capital in to get that MSI. So let's say something went and things were removed from our capital tax, would we have to find something of equal value or risk not being able to allocate it and then losing that MSI?
Ms. Whiteway?
Thanks, Mayor Given. No, the capital tax will not impact the MSI at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Who else did I have in the queue? If we don't have anyone else, then so I'll come back to Councilor Rossi. So I would encourage Council to support the motion. As I said before, I would be interested and in favor of looking at a more comprehensive sort of vision for Revolution Place. I think we can do that in addition to, and I think we could take advantage of the capital tax money that's here if Council felt that it was important. I think we still have that potential, and so if this is an idea that people want to explore, I'd encourage Council to support this motion that's on the floor, and then to follow up with a motion asking administration to bring back more information on a more comprehensive approach to Revolution Place. But certainly, I think that this motion here lays the groundwork, and if we needed to use some of these funds, administration's smart enough that they'd be able to pull them in or stop projects if Council decided quickly enough that we're going to do something else. Councillor Bressie, and then we will look to close. Councillor Bressie?
Great, thank you. Just one more question. It's just about the spillway repairs. I'm just curious in terms of it's a dam that is within the city of Grande Prairie, but has huge impact on land that's outside the city of Grande Prairie. Is it ordinary that when big capital investments are made in something that really is a regional asset and something with regional importance, that it's only the funding for the host municipality goes to it, or is it usual for the province to help kick in or other regional partners to help kick in for something like that?
City Manager Galante?
Okay. That's a good question, and because the injection of funding into structures like this is so rare. We're talking every 15, 20 years. Sometimes we do some significant maintenance. It's a good potential topic for ICF, for example, because a lot of the tributaries are in the county. Right now, I would say that 90% or more of the watershed is outside the city limits, but the control structure is within the city limits. So it's a fair point to bring this to the table potentially for some contribution during the ICF conversations that we will be having soon. So again, I think the last repair was done on the gates about 8 to 10 years ago, relatively small amount. But with the recent events, the energy dissipation system at the bottom of the spillway, there's some relatively minor damage there. The erosion control going into the main channel has been damaged. There is some settlements on the gabions. The north slope is failing. I observed some settlements, and the full slope is loading the north wing wall, which is structurally broken. So there is a need for urgent repairs on the structure. But in terms of funding, it's a good point, Councillor Bressie, to connect with the county or to submit some applications for some relief at the provincial level as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Galante. I just want to check did I have anybody else in the queue? Don't think so. I just want to check, Director Bork, are you there? You're frozen on my screen. And I know that Councillor Clayton is trying to get back in. So
he is frozen. It is frozen for Director Bork, so.
He's like a sphinx normally, but he usually moves a little bit more. So, and he's the host of this meeting, so he may not be able to let Councillor Clayton back in. So I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Whiteway.
No, I think he's trying, he's working on it, so, but it's hard when he's the host to be frozen.
Yeah. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see if I can get Councillor Clayton on audio. I'll come out of my ears.
Yeah, he just said he can't let her in. It's not letting him.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. So I'm just going to call Councillor Clayton here and get her on audio. I want to make sure that we do it. I was frozen yesterday and kicked out, and it was super frustrating. Jackie, I've got you on speakerphone, and we'll do that just so that we can make sure that we don't miss you in terms of voting on this, because you'd be the only council member that's not there. So we've got a workaround. Everybody, can you hear Jackie?
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, everybody's nodding their heads and they're giving me thumbs up. So, Councillor Clayton, I think we were just about to move on. There wasn't anybody else in the queue on Councillor O'Toole's motion, so I was going to go to Councillor O'Toole to close before I called for the vote. Councillor O'Toole, did you have?
Sorry, if I finish what I was saying?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry. That's right. We were in the middle of something.
Okay. As I was saying, there was items brought forward at the last budget discussion that were approved. Now we're bringing forward more items for Revolution Place. Without a fulsome discussion or a full discussion on what the future is of this facility, what we're hoping to obtain at this facility. And I feel it's really rushed, particularly in this facility. And so I'd be happy to amend the motion or possibly, I think that's probably best. I don't know, look for your guidance, Mayor. Are we better to amend or suggest to defeat it and try a different motion?
Yeah, so we did actually kind of talk about that a little bit while you were offline, and my advice to everybody on that point was that we could pass this motion. Administration clarified that the capital tax is much more flexible, and if we chose not to spend it, quickly here, because council was headed a different direction with a more comprehensive plan, they would be able to manage that. So my advice was, if there's an interest in that kind of discussion, to pass this motion and follow up with a motion asking administration to do something else about a more comprehensive plan with Revolution Place. So that.
Yeah, and I guess my concern with that is the original comments from administration were some of the thought in getting these items through fairly quickly were to start processes to create some economy and build some some opportunities for construction in our community. So I don't really see the point in approving these if we're not going to do them. So, if we're not going to do the Revolution Place vision that was basically presented yesterday for the first time and these 25-year enhancements, then in my opinion, we shouldn't pass this motion with those things allocated as they are. So I encourage council then, based on that, to defeat this motion, and we can come back to look at what it looks like with the MSI, the gas tax, and future discussions on some of the capital tax items as listed.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Clayton. I see you there, Councillor Palat. We'll give you one last opportunity before we go to Councillor O'Toole to close. Oh, and Councillor Blackburn wants in again. Okay. Councillor Palat.
Sorry, Mayor Given. I was just wondering more if it would matter if we split this, because it sounds like we really need to deal with MSI and the gas. If we just amended the motion to just those things, if that would be good for today, or if we need to do, it was just more of a question, I guess, for administration. If the motion was amended to just say approve those two line items, would that get the intent of what everybody was hoping for from the administration today? And then we could have another conversation about the capital tax separately?
I would look to Ms. Whiteway, I guess, or City Manager Galante.
Okay. So for Councillor Pilat, could you please be more specific? I'm having a hard time understanding your main goal for the.
Sorry, Horacio. I just mean, what if we, if I made an amendment to the motion that said that we'll approve all the capital tax plan revisions for MSI and gas tax funding today, period, but nothing to do with capital. So we didn't touch the capital tax items at all today. But we could through other motions. I'd like to see this pass, and know I'm having a hard time supporting this the way the motion is right now because I'm struggling with the capital tax side, the same as Councillor Clayton is.
Okay, well, the problem with that will be that several projects will be put on hold, and I don't know for how long or what kind of level of detail you may ask administration to come back. I mean, I'm seeing 2, 4, 6 projects with capital tax attached that may delay work, and one of the main objectives here is to speed up work and hire more people here to put people back to work. So depending again the nature of the specifics, if that motion passes, then I think we will need more specifics about what you would like to see coming back from us. Okay.
Yeah, and Councillor Platt, so I do have others in the queue. Councillor Blackburn, I think I saw Councillor Friesen. But the capital tax column has Eastlink Center, which I haven't heard anybody talk about. I haven't heard anybody talk about Hillside Railway fencing. We had a brief mention about the Ernie Radbourne Pavilion, but that hasn't been the significant focus. I haven't heard anybody talk about Council Economic Recovery Fund. So I think it's not all of the capital. It sounds, to me, like it's been about Revolution Place. I could be mistaken, but if it's about Revolution Place, well, then let's tell administration that we want to talk about Revolution Place. Councillor Blackburn and then Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. It seems to me that what we're talking about here is budget. And I know that in any of the other budget items that we've approved last fall, there comes another opportunity to say, hey, put on the brakes, we don't want to spend this money. So I think that approving it in the budget isn't a bad idea at all. And then if we need to, as you say, revisit exactly what we're talking about with Revolution Place, then we would still have the opportunity to do that. I recognize that there is a timing issue in terms of being able to take advantage of the closing of the space so that the renovation could be done. And I like the idea of providing the opportunities for employment that would come with it. But if we don't approve it in the budget, then it's not going to happen this year at all. So I would recommend that we go ahead and approve this budget as it's been presented. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I generally, completely like what administration has given us today. We gave them a task, they have delivered, and they've delivered well. I hear what the arguments about, should Revolution Place perhaps be held back today because we don't know what we're doing in the big picture for that facility. And I am completely on board probably with doing a little more significant project on Revolution Place. But what I've heard from administration today is that the capital tax is not lost money if it's not used. If we approve it today, we know that the building will remain empty for the better part of the summer. We're not going to see the big return of events until at least September, and in all likelihood, even later this year or 2021. So we have a little time to make a decision about what we might want to do in the long term. Even having approved this capital tax today for the vision for the 25-year anniversary enhancement. And I heard from Director Miller that there is a willingness to keep to costs that are not throwaway should there be something else coming down the pipe. And we know that the management of that facility has been good stewards of the money that we've approved for them before, and has come back and said, yeah, we don't need this. That's not, here's some money that we haven't used, and given it back to us rather than spending it for spending's sake. So with all of that, I would hate to see that any of this capital tax expenditures or projects that we approve today are held up because we have an issue with Revolution Place. In particular, that hillside railway fencing, not something that we've heard time and again was really problematic last year for residents of Hillside. To hold up that $40,000 project because we can't decide on what we might do with Revolution Place, I think would be a mistake. So I would encourage my colleagues to approve what is presented today, and I do hope that there would be a follow-up motion. In fact, I'd be prepared to make a follow-up motion to ask administration to give us more information about what a big picture for Revolution Place would look like, such that we can breathe some new life into it and give it another 10 years or even more. And in the absence of having talked about a replacement for it, I think that's really what we are looking at, is another 10 years or more. So that would be my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thanks. Mayor Given, can I get in the queue?
Yes, you can. You're after Councillor Bressie.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm going to try an amending motion, and then I'll wait to see if you think it's in order before I speak to it. But I'd move that we amend Councillor O'Toole's motion to remove the 2 line items referring to Revolution Place.
Okay, so I mean, that motion is in order. I'm not sure that I'm going to actually call for debate on it. I think we've heard a bunch of people talk about the merits of that specific point. Councillor Clayton, did you hear Councillor Bressie's amendment motion?
I did, yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'll rule that in order, and Councillor Bressie, I'll give you one chance to speak to it.
I still have something to add.
Yeah, by all means, you can add to the overall thing, but we're talking to Councillor Bressie's amendment now.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't think I've spoken to Revolution Place yet today, and I won't speak to it too much because I don't have much to add that others haven't said. Other than this, if this amendment doesn't pass, it's very difficult for me to vote in favor of the overall motion. So it goes from an easy yes to me to a very difficult, you need to convince me yes if this amendment doesn't pass, but for the same reasons that have already been said by others.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. So
I'd like to speak to the amendment if possible.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I absolutely support this amendment. I think that although the timing of this work is eminent right now, I don't think that without a full discussion on the future, that any money needs to be spent other than that was passed in the prior budget. I remind Council that capital tax money has direct implication on tax rates to our ratepayers. And as we get ready looking at next year, administration has warned us that there may be a tax increase next year. We may need some opportunities to be able to reduce that tax increase. And the way we're going to have that is not spending all the money that we have to spend. So until we have a full discussion on what Revolution Place looks like, I don't want us to be spending any money. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. Does anybody else feel the need to speak to the amendment? No. Okay, then I'll call for the vote. All in favor of Councillor Bressie's amendment? I see 2 on screen, and Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
Opposed.
So
in support, in favor of the amendment, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So that's 3 in favor of the amendment, and those opposed to the amendment? Okay, and that's the balance there. That's the other 6. So we're back to the main motion. Councillor O'Toole, I'll go to you to close.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Given, for the opportunity to close. I just want to speak up that there were some concerns about Revolution Place. I think Councillor Friesen is going to make a follow-up motion that will allow us to have maybe a workshop or another CCW where we can talk about the future of Revolution Place. I look at it as putting more investment into a building so it's worth its value and it keeps it more modern. With that, I just, you know how you're going to vote, and I would just encourage you to take the positive side and support this motion. And we can debate this all day, which we've spent a little bit of time on, but I think it's the right thing to do, and we can always withdraw some items from the budget if that's what council wants to do. This is fixed at this time, but we can also take money away and not support it in the future. So it's been already talked about. So with that, vote the way you want to vote, but I would encourage you to vote in favor of this motion.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. I'll call for the vote. All in favor of Councillor O'Toole's motion, which is the recommendation in the report? Okay, and Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
Opposed.
Okay, so that is 8-1. Okay, was there Councillor Palat?
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I didn't mean to beat Eunice the punch here, but I kind of had something pre-written and had some help with somebody else here to get it. So I just would like to make a motion regarding the Revolution Place specifically. It's directing administration to bring back a report on how council can initiate a design build process beginning in 2020 to expedite the following enhancements to Revolution Place. They're specifically around the storms letter, the west landing expansion, and the enhancements that we already discussed in capital tax. My hope was this, that we get a report back from administration so we can look at the $544,000 we just approved and see how it fits into the plan, but also look at how we can have the conversation about what it would look like to move forward some of these other projects so we can have that overall wholesome conversation about the Revolution Place. And I can repeat that back if needed. It was a fairly lengthy one, so.
I'll just look to Arlene. Arlene, do you think your team is able to catch that motion?
We'll be able to capture it all, but Councillor Palat, if you could send that to me, please. Thank you.
Okay. So open for discussion, debate on Councillor Palat's motion. Is there anybody on screen that wishes to discuss that? Councillor Blackburn?
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. I'm certainly in support of Councillor Palat's intention here to have a further look at Revolution Place. I just want to comment, if I may, that even if we do go with some sort of a replacement for Revolution Place or some different future for it, it's going to take a fair number of years to accomplish whatever it is that we decide that we want to do. And in the meantime, the enhancements that have been discussed already and are proposed in this budget serve us and our residents now. And I would hope that if Councillor Palat's motion passes, that it doesn't put the brakes on the other things that we've considered for Revolution Place in the near future. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. I saw Councillor Minhas and then Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Minhas?
Yes, sir. Yes, I would support this motion for sure because we need more study on this one and figure out a better way to do it, and even if we have to spend a little more money.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Minhas. Councillor O'Toole?
Thanks very much, Mayor Gibbon. I do fully support this. It's 25 years since there's been some major investment. We did put the trusses up in the last term, and that enhanced the tour gigs that could come to Grande Prairie. And we were having bands coming here that couldn't play in the Saddle Dome. So with that, I think that it'll give a new, fresh coat of paint, plus a new way of doing business with the technology that's going on. I think I totally support this, and I'm looking to see what are proposed in the near future.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Was there anybody else? Councillor Clayton, did you have anything to say on the Councillor Palat's motion?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else on Councillor Palat's motion? Being no one, then I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Okay, so we're gonna have to take Councillor Blackburn as having exited for a moment. So I'll just, again, can I get all in favor on screen? Okay, and Councillor Clayton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, so we've got 8, and Councillor Blackburn was just not in the room for that vote. Okay, I see there's still a few hands left. Councillor Bressie, then Councillor O'Toole, and then Councillor Platt. And you're muted, Councillor Bressie.
My apologies. I'd also like us to, I'm going to make a motion regarding the Smithland 2, a follow-up motion, and that is to direct administration to report back to the appropriate committee with current plans for Smithland prior to committing to work not on or directly adjacent to Park Road and 92nd Ave. And I'm also pasting that in the chat if anybody wants to see it in writing. But just the intent of this is, as I said before, I fully support the work along Park Road and 92nd Ave. That makes sense. That's long overdue. But a little jog in the land probably makes sense, but I really don't know what the outline of that land might look like, whether it's with housing, whether it's with rec centers. And I really think that we should be having a conversation, period. This council hasn't had a real conversation other than not moving ahead with funding previous plans about that piece of land. So that conversation, I think, needs to happen before we put paving through it. So I don't intend to hold up. And just as I say this, I'd point out to council that the backgrounder we received says the construction is not going to start likely till 2021 anyways. So if we do take a few months to have this conversation, it's not like we're slowing down work that would have happened in 2020 anyway. So I don't think that my understanding is this isn't likely to necessarily slow down the economic impact of this if we approve this motion.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Bressie. I see a few others, but on this point, Director Glavin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. Just to speak to Councillor Bressie's point. So yeah, we would have a little bit of flexibility to do some of that work in advance, but whenever we go forward with design, we have to start the design at some point. So the design is obviously the precursor to the construction. So the longer we take to start the design, the longer it takes to start construction. So we do have time to do some additional work on that before we go to design, but probably not months, but we'd have a couple months anyways.
So yeah, let's just make sure that we get your intent really sort of clear here, Councillor Bressie. Is your intention to do can you clarify that?
Yeah, so my intention is, well, sorry, can I ask a question first? So Director Glavin, I guess 2 questions. First of all, is there any reason that you can't be doing the design work for the Park Road and 92nd Avenue without knowing what goes on for the rest of it? And I guess the other one is in the total magnitude of, if I'm understanding it earlier, that little jog of roads worth about $1 million. Do you know roughly about how much of that money would be design work and how much would that be actual physical work?
So design often comes in around 4% of the overall budget. So call that 40 grand plus construction supervision, which is usually around 6%. So design and construction is usually around 10-ish% of the total budget. But the project also includes services being extended from the north down. You'll notice on that map. So the number, I wouldn't take 4 million and 1 million as rock solid numbers. They're order of magnitude estimates.
So Councillor Bressie, can I make a suggestion? I think you were intending construction work.
Yeah, so I was going to say, Mayor Given, if you permit me, then I'd love to have a friendly amendment if council will permit me to put construction into that motion. So if they want to do design work, completely fine with that. But before we commit to putting shovels on the ground, I'd like to have more conversation.
Before we commit to putting shovels on the ground on that portion of the project.
Exactly.
Yeah. Council to have a decision point. Okay. Is that clear for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Okay. I'm seeing everybody else nodding. Okay. Any discussion on Councillor Bressie's motion? Okay, I don't see anybody. Councillor Clayton?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll call for the vote on Councillor Bressie's motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor. And opposed? 1 opposed. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Thanks for catching me on that. Then we did have a couple of others, Councillor O'Toole and then Councillor Palat.
No, what had to be said has been said already, so I'm good to go. Thank you.
You're good? Okay. Okay, thanks. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm going to make a motion here, just in the timing's kind of ironic that we had an economic advisory committee today, and we're having a a heck of a time, even though we've got some amazing people sitting on that committee, getting them engaged. And I've been thinking about it a lot. They're calling me, we're chatting. And part of the problem I think we have with that committee is it actually doesn't really have any teeth. Most other committees actually give away money that we have, and they have a purpose. So I'm going to make a motion that Council Economic Recovery Fund be administered by the Economic Advisory Committee, and they're to provide funding allocations that will be approved by Council. So at the end of the day, I want Council to still have full authority of where the money goes. I would really like to have this committee, though, actually sit around the table and say, hey, guys, we've got $500,000. What are we doing? And that's the Abe Newfelds and the guys that are surrounding that table have excitement about trying to get involved. We really don't have anything to have them come involved other than the chat, you know, and I'd really like to give this committee value. We have funding committees in all other areas of the city. I don't want to prescript it to stop it from being where Council would have full overall say. I just would really like to have this committee have some teeth.
Okay, so do you want to just make sure that we've got that wording?
Okay, so the Council Economic Recovery Fund be administered by the Economic Advisory Committee to provide further allocation, to provide funding allocations that will be approved by City Council.
Okay. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I think this is a motion that certainly deserves consideration, Councillor Platt, but I also think it's something that we would, or I would like some time to be able to contemplate and do some research and discussion on. I'd rather see this as a notice of motion rather than something that we would deal with today. I don't know how you might rule on that, Mayor Given, but that's my observation.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. You know, I wonder, Councillor Platt, I wonder if you'd be interested in requesting administration bring forward a recommendation to the appropriate standing committee, which would be, you know, like a committee of council. We've got council next week, and then we have committee the following week after. I wonder if that would give administration enough time to bring forward some, sort of flesh that out a little bit, so that we could kind of know what we're getting into. I think I'm like Councillor Blackburn. I think I might like the idea. I just would like to know a little bit about how it would work, or, you know, if there's some bounds on that, or how, you know. So I would support a motion asking administration to tell us how to do that properly. You know what I mean? Like let's go and get admin to do that work and then come back. Your motion is just let them award the money. No, I'd like administration to tell us how to do that properly.
No, and fair enough. My intent wasn't to try to fast track this. It was just kind of hey, that's just how we operate, I guess. But I would be happy to amend my motion to say that administration bring back a report to appropriate standing committee that would show us how we could allow the Economic Advisory Committee provide funding allocations for council.
Of council's Economic Recovery Fund. Yeah,
specifically, yeah. Thanks for that correction.
Okay, sure.
And you know, if this could happen in the next 2 weeks to a month, that would be great. I think, you know, even just having that conversation next month at our Economic Development Committee saying, hey guys, we might have some opportunity on how this money is going to be spent and where it's going to be allocated, would sure get that group engaged again. So, you know, we got a month before meeting there anyways.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Any other discussion on that point? Look to my faces on the screen. I don't see anybody waving their hands. Ask Councillor Clayton. Any discussion on that point, Councillor Clayton?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Then if there wasn't anything, then I'll call for the vote on Councillor Palat's motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And opposed? I see one opposed. Okay, good. We got everybody. That adds up. Was there anything else for our Council Committee of the Whole this afternoon? Seeing none, then I think we'll call our meeting adjourned. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.